Jake started with the chairs. He needed something that could bend and spring back. The seats were made of a flexible composite material. It was designed to be comfortable for different alien body types. That meant it had to bend and flex. Perfect for what he needed. He selected 2 chairs and turned them over. The backrest was attached to a metal frame. Jake used the edge of his academy badge to work on the connection points. His badge was made of hard composite material. It was not a proper tool, but it would have to do. He pushed and pried at the joint where the seat material connected to the frame. It was slow work. His fingers started to hurt. Sweat formed on his forehead. But gradually, he freed a long strip of the flexible material. He pulled it between his hands, testing it. Good. It had elasticity. It would snap back when stretched. That was exactly what a bowstring needed. Next, he needed the main body of the bow. He looked at the instructor's podium. It had a metal railing around its edge. The railing was made of lightweight metal with some flexibility. Jake approached Commander Vexthor again. "Sir, I need to remove part of the podium railing," he said. The commander looked at the podium, then back at Jake. "That podium costs more than you will earn in your first year of service," he said. But then he gestured with one of his forearms. "Proceed." Jake found where 2 sections of the railing connected. He gripped both sides and worked them back and forth. The metal was strong, but the connecting piece was weaker. He bent it one way, then the other, again and again. He was creating stress fractures in the joint. After 15 minutes of patient work, the section broke free. He held a piece about 1.5 meters long. He tested it carefully, bending it. The flex was not perfect, but it would work. This would be the stave of his bow, the main body that stored the energy. Now came the tricky part. He needed to attach the flexible material as a bowstring. In ancient Earth, humans used animal sinew or plant fibers. They tied careful knots at each end. Here, Jake had to improvise with modern materials. He walked to the wall where data cables ran between terminals. He carefully pulled one loose and stripped away the outer covering. Inside were fiber optic threads. He braided several of them together to make a stronger cord. Then he used this cord to create notches at each end of his metal bow stave. The flexible composite material could be tied to these notches. Jake worked carefully, making sure the tension was even on both sides. If one side was tighter than the other, the bow would not shoot straight. Commander Vexthor watched every move. Other instructors began entering the room. Word must have spread about what the human was doing. They stood along the walls watching in silence. Some looked curious. Others looked doubtful. Jake had used 30 minutes. He had the basic bow constructed, but he was not finished. A bow needed arrows. Without arrows, it was just a bent stick. He turned back to the remaining chairs and examined the legs. They were hollow metal tubes, lightweight but rigid. Each one was about 0.5 meters long. Perfect, he worked on removing 4 of them. The connections were stronger than he expected, but he used his body weight as leverage. For fletching, the fins that make arrows fly straight, Jake looked at his uniform jacket. It pained him to do it, but he tore strips from the fabric. He had worked hard to earn this uniform, but authenticity required sacrifice. He used more fiber optic cord to bind the fabric strips to the rear of each arrow shaft. The last challenge was making arrowheads. He needed something sharp and hard. His eyes found the metal fragments from where he had broken the podium railing. Small triangular pieces of alloy lay on the floor. Jake picked them up and examined them. He used the edge of a desk as an anvil. He worked each piece back and forth, bending it repeatedly at the same point. The metal grew warm from the friction. Slowly, the edges became sharper. They were not razor sharp, but they had points. He bound each one to the front of an arrow shaft with fiber optic cord. With 10 minutes left, Jake stood back. He looked at what he had created. It was not beautiful. The bow was asymmetrical. The arrows looked rough and uneven. The whole thing appeared exactly like what it was, a weapon made from broken furniture. But Jake strung the bow and felt the tension in the composite material. He knew it would work. He had built a weapon in less than an hour using nothing but classroom materials and human ingenuity. The classroom had filled with people. At least a dozen instructors lined the walls. Several older students had returned early. Jake saw his classmates filing back in. Some looked curious. Others looked like they were ready to laugh at him again. Commander Vexthor stood as the hour ended. "Cadet Morrison," he said loudly. "Present your weapon." Jake picked up the bow and his makeshift arrows. The room became completely silent. He walked to the front of the classroom. Every eye was on him. Some looked amused. Others looked confused. A few looked genuinely interested. He held the bow up for everyone to see. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. This was his moment. This was humanity's moment. He would show them what humans could do. He would show them that advanced technology was not the only path to survival. The bow felt light in his hands. The crude arrows sat in a bundle he had fashioned from more torn uniform fabric. He looked at Commander Vexthor and waited for instructions. "Explain your weapon," the commander said. Jake took a breath. "This is a bow and arrow. It is one of humanity's oldest projectile weapons. Humans were using bows at least 20,000 Earth years ago. Maybe longer. We use them for hunting, for war, and for sport. Almost every human culture created them independently." Someone in the back of the room said something that sounded like laughter. Jake continued as if he had not heard. "The principle is simple," he said. "Energy is stored in the bent limbs of the bow. When released, that energy transfers to the arrow. The beauty of the bow is not its complexity. It is its simplicity. Any human with basic materials could create one. Wood, bone, stone, plant fiber. We used what we had." "Fascinating," Commander Vexthor said. His tone was neutral. Jake could not tell if he was impressed or disappointed. "But this is a tactical weapons course. Can you demonstrate that it works? Or is it just for show?" "I can demonstrate, sir," Jake said. "But I need a target." The commander gestured to another instructor. A holographic target appeared at the far end of the classroom. It was about 30 meters away. It was a standard combat silhouette, the kind used for marksmanship training with energy weapons. "That target is designed for energy weapons with perfect accuracy," Vexthor noted. "Do you truly believe you can hit it with that primitive device?" Jake notched one of his arrows. The moment of truth had arrived. Jake Morrison tried to make himself small in his seat. The classroom was huge, filled with students from different alien worlds. He was the only human there. Everyone else was bigger, stronger, or had special abilities that humans did not have. Jake looked down at his datapad and hoped nobody would notice him. The instructor walked back and forth at the front of the room. His name was Commander Vexthor, and he was a Krellian. He had 4 arms and 3 eyes. His voice came through a translator device that turned his clicks and whistles into words everyone could understand. "Before we had energy weapons," the commander said, "every species used primitive weapons. Today, each of you will show the class a weapon from your people's history. This will help us understand how different species learned to fight and survive." Jake felt his heart sink. He knew this assignment was coming, but he was not ready. The other students had brought weapons from their home planets. They had access to museums and family collections. Jake only had a small datapad with some information about Earth. He had nothing to show. "Cadet Gentar," the commander called out. "You go first." A large reptile-like student stood up. He pulled out a crystal blade from his bag. It looked sharp and dangerous. He explained how his people made it and how they used it to fight on their homeworld. The commander nodded and seemed pleased. One after another, students showed their weapons. A Valorian student showed a net launcher. A Quellan student demonstrated a sonic device that made painful sounds. Each weapon was interesting. Each student had clearly prepared. The other students asked questions and discussed the tactical uses of each weapon. Then Commander Vexthor looked straight at Jake with all 3 of his eyes. "Cadet Morrison," he said, "the human, I am very interested in your presentation. Your species has a reputation for being violent. You only recently learned to travel faster than light. Show us what primitive humans used before they reached the stars." The entire room became quiet. Jake could feel everyone staring at him. He slowly stood up. His hands were empty. He had tried to bring something from Earth, but the military liaison had said no. They told him firearms were too dangerous. They said it would be embarrassing for humanity. They would not let him bring anything. "I do not have anything with me, sir," Jake said. He tried to keep his voice steady. Laughter filled the room. The alien students made clicking sounds and buzzing noises. It was their way of laughing. Commander Vexthor's mouth parts moved in a way that might have been a smile or a frown. Jake could not tell which. "Nothing?" the commander said. "The violent humans have nothing to show? Perhaps your reputation is wrong. Or perhaps you did not prepare. Either way, this is not acceptable." Jake felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "I am giving you 1 hour," the commander continued. "Use the Academy's fabrication lab. Access any database you need. Come back with something that shows human weapons development. Everyone else, class is over. Come back in 60 standard minutes. The other students began leaving. They talked and laughed as they walked out. Jake stood there frozen. 1 hour was not enough time. The fabrication labs required special clearance. He was just a first-year cadet. They would never give him access in time. Even if they did, he would have to navigate the bureaucracy, fill out forms, and wait for approvals. It was impossible. As the last students left, Jake looked around the empty classroom. His mind raced. What could he do? How could he show these advanced aliens that humans were not just lucky primitives? What would represent humanity's strength? His eyes moved across the classroom. He saw the chairs made of flexible material. He saw the instructor's podium made of metal. He saw data cables running along the walls. He saw broken pieces of equipment in the corner. Suddenly, Jake smiled. Maybe he did not need the fabrication labs. Maybe he did not need advanced technology. Humans had conquered Earth not because they had the best natural weapons. They conquered it because they used what they had available. They were creative. They adapted. They survived. It was time to show these aliens what that meant. Jake walked to the front of the classroom where Commander Vexthor was organizing his tablets. "Sir," Jake said, "I have a request." All three of the commander's eyes focused on him. "You want more time? You want access to better resources? You want authorization for the fabrication labs?" "No, sir," Jake said. "I want permission to use materials from this classroom." The commander stared at him for a long moment. "Explain." Jake took a deep breath. Human weapons development was not just about what we made in factories. It was about using whatever was available. It was about adapting and improvising. I want to demonstrate that by building a weapon from things in this room. Commander Vexthor's three eyes narrowed. "You want to build a functional weapon from classroom furniture? In less than an hour?" "Yes, sir. This I must see," the commander said. His mandibles spread wide. "You have my permission, Cadet Morrison. But if you damage Academy property and fail to produce results, the cost will come from your pay. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir." The commander sat down in a chair to watch. Jake could tell he was curious but also doubtful. Most aliens in the galaxy came from worlds where they were natural predators. They had claws, armor, venom, or special abilities. They did not understand what it meant to have nothing. They did not understand what it meant to need tools to survive. But Jake understood. Every human understood. They had no natural weapons. They had no armor or claws. They were weak compared to most predators on Earth. But they had one advantage. They could think. They could create. They could turn anything into a tool. Jake looked at the chairs again. He thought about what he needed to build. A bow, it was perfect. Simple, effective, and something any human culture could have created. Every continent on Earth had independently invented the bow. It was a fundamental human tool. He grabbed one of the chairs and began taking it apart. The seat was made of flexible composite material. It could bend without breaking. That would work for the bowstring. The frame was made of light metal. That could be useful too. Commander Vexthor watched in silence. Jake ignored him and focused on his work. He had less than an hour. He had no proper tools, but he had something more important. He had the human ability to make something from nothing. He had thousands of years of human ingenuity flowing through his blood. The clock was ticking. Jake got to work. Jake held the arrow against the bowstring. The fiber optic cord was rough against his fingers. It was nothing like the smooth strings of modern bows. He had done archery at summer camp when he was younger, but that was years ago. Still, the basic movements came back to him. The human body remembered these things. He raised the bow and drew back the string. He felt the tension build in his shoulders and back muscles. The metal stave creaked under the stress. For a moment, Jake worried it might snap, but it held firm. He sighted down the arrow shaft, looking at the holographic target 30 meters away. The arrow would drop as it flew. Gravity would pull it down. He had to aim slightly high to compensate. He adjusted his aim, took a breath, and released. The arrow flew through the air. It was not a perfect flight. The makeshift fletching caused it to wobble slightly. The trajectory arced more than a laser beam would, but it flew straight enough. The metal arrowhead struck the holographic target just left of the center. The impact sensor registered a hit. The room exploded with noise. Alien students made surprise sounds in dozens of different languages. Clicking, buzzing, chirping, and whistling filled the air. Several cadets stood up to see better. Jake heard someone mention kinetic projectiles and energy signatures. Impressive, Commander Vexthor said. Jake could hear real respect in his voice now. But one shot proves little. Any weapon can succeed once through luck. Jake already had his second arrow ready. He notched it, drew, aimed, and released. Another hit closer to center this time. He reached for the third arrow. Drew, released, hit. Fourth arrow, hit. He lowered the empty bow. 4 shots, 4 hits at 30 meters. He had built the weapon in less than an hour from classroom furniture, and it worked. His shoulder ached from the unfamiliar strain. His fingers were raw from the rough bowstring. But the message was clear. Humans could create weapons from nothing. A Gentar cadet raised her clawed hand. I have a question for the human. That weapon has no power cell. It has no energy converter. It has no targeting system. How do you aim it? With my eyes and my judgment, Jake answered. The arrow's path is affected by gravity, air resistance, and the force I apply when I release. I calculate all of that in my head and adjust my aim. It takes practice, but it becomes natural after a while. But that means the weapon depends entirely on the user's skill, a Valorian student said. A soldier with poor training would be useless. Why would humans create weapons that need so much training when you could just make a weapon that aims itself? Jake smiled. He had expected this question. Because we did not have the technology to make weapons that aim themselves. We had to develop the skill ourselves. But that skill had advantages. A human archer could pick up any bow anywhere and use it. They were not dependent on power cells or replacement parts. They did not need maintenance facilities. Give a human a stick, some cord, and a sharp rock, and they could feed themselves or defend their territory. Commander Vexthor walked around the holographic target. He studied where the arrows had hit. Energy weapons can be disabled by electromagnetic pulses. They need ammunition cartridges or recharging. They have electronic signatures that can be detected and tracked. This weapon has none of those vulnerabilities. It has other weaknesses, Jake admitted. He wanted to be honest. It is slower to fire than modern weapons. The range is limited. The user is exposed while drawing the bow, but in the right circumstances, in the right hands, it is deadly. And more importantly, it shows the human approach to war. We did not wait for perfect technology. We used what we had and made it work. An instructor Jake did not recognize stepped forward. He was tall and looked like an insect. Commander Vexthor, may I test something? The commander nodded. The instructor pulled out a small device. This is a standard military sensor. It detects enemy combatants in the field. He activated it and swept it across the room. The device beeped and chimed as it detected various electronic devices. It detected the weapons some cadets still carried. It detected their communicators and data pads. Then the instructor pointed it at Jake in the bow. The device was completely silent. No signature at all, the instructor said. To military sensors, this weapon does not exist. It is invisible. A wave of understanding moved through the room. Jake saw it on face after alien face. In an age of advanced sensors and computers, a weapon that produced no electronic signature was almost invisible. It could not be detected until it was too late. A senior cadet, a Krellian, spoke up. But Commander, this is just a curiosity. It has no practical use in modern warfare. Any soldier with a plasma rifle would eliminate a bowman before he could get within range. In open warfare, yes, Jake said before the commander could respond. But warfare is not always open conflict. Explain, Commander Vexthor commanded. Jake thought carefully about his words. Insurgency, guerrilla tactics, survival situations, covert operations. He held up the bow. This weapon needs no supply chain. It can be made locally from available materials. It is silent. It leaves no energy signature, and maybe most importantly, it is not in any weapons database. In occupied territory, under sensor surveillance, sometimes the best weapon is the one that does not look like a weapon. A new voice spoke from the doorway. The cadet is correct, everyone turned. A human in a captain's uniform stood there. It was Captain Greg Holland, one of the few human instructors at the academy. Permission to join the discussion, Commander? Granted, Vexthor said. Please, Captain Holland, share your thoughts. Captain Holland walked to the front of the classroom. His eyes met Jake's briefly. Jake saw approval there. The captain picked up one of the makeshift arrows and examined it. Before humanity reached the stars, Holland said, we had a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Humans evolved in an environment that was trying to kill us. We had no natural armor. We had no venom. We had no claws or fangs worth mentioning. We were prey animals that became apex predators through one advantage, our ability to create and use tools. He held up the arrow for everyone to see. What the cadet demonstrated is not just a weapon, it is a mindset. The human ability to look at any environment and see resources instead of obstacles. That chair's not just furniture, it is potential bow staves and bowstring. That data cable is not just electronics, it is binding material. This mindset is why humanity survived on Earth. It is why we will survive out here among the stars. The room was completely silent now. Every student, every instructor was listening. Captain Holland continued, you asked if this weapon has practical value. Let me ask you this. What if the armory is destroyed? What if you are behind enemy lines? What if you are stranded on an unknown world? What if you are a prisoner trying to escape? He paused. A human would look around and see weapons. A human would survive. That is our advantage. The classroom buzzed with conversation. Students and instructors discussed what they had just seen. Some argued about the practical value of primitive weapons. Others talked about the implications of undetectable weapons. Commander Vexthor raised one of his four hands for silence. Settle down, he said firmly. This is a learning opportunity. He turned to Jake. Cadet Morrison, you have made your point well, but let us explore the reality. Your weapon is impressive as a demonstration of human cleverness. But how practical is it in actual modern warfare? Jake carefully unstrung his bow to relieve the tension. He did not want it to break now. In open warfare against modern forces, sir, not very practical. A soldier with a plasma rifle would kill a bowman before he got close enough to be dangerous. But warfare is not always open conflict. Explain further, Vexthor said. Jake organized his thoughts. Insurgency, guerrilla tactics, survival situations, covert operations. He held up the bow again. This weapon needs no supply chain. It can be built locally from materials anyone can find. It is completely silent. It leaves no signature that sensors can detect. And maybe most importantly, it is not in any weapons database. In occupied territory where the enemy is watching everything, sometimes the most effective weapon is one that does not look like a weapon at all. Captain Holland nodded. The cadet speaks the truth. Before humanity reached space, we fought many wars. The side with better technology did not always win. Sometimes the side that adapted better, that used their environment better, that refused to give up, those were the ones who won. A senior Krellian cadet raised a pincer. Captain, with respect, this seems inefficient. Why spend an hour building an inferior weapon when you could get a proper weapon from the armory in minutes? Good question, Cadet. Holland looked for a name. Crixnall, sir. Cadet Crixnall, you are right that in ideal circumstances, building weapons from furniture is inefficient. But what about when circumstances are not ideal? What if the armory is destroyed? What if you are behind enemy lines with no support? What if you are stranded on an uncharted planet? What if you are a prisoner trying to escape? Holland placed the arrow back on the desk. Every species in this room comes from a homeworld where they were dominant. Krellians have 4 arms and natural armor. Centaur have claws and can regenerate. Valorians have mental powers. Quellans have biological toxins. When your ancestors faced danger, they could rely on what nature gave them. He paused and looked around the room. Humans had none of that. When we faced a predator stronger than us, we could not outrun it. We could not overpower it. So we picked up a rock. Then we learned to sharpen the rock. Then we tied the rock to a stick. Then we invented ways to throw the rock farther and faster. Then we invented chemistry to make better rocks. Every human advancement came from the same place. We had a problem. We lacked natural tools to solve it, so we made artificial ones. Jake watched his classmates. Some looked thoughtful. Others still seemed skeptical. A few looked disturbed by the idea of a species so naturally defenseless that they constantly had to invent new ways to survive. Commander Vexthor spoke again. Captain Holland, are you saying that this approach gives humans a tactical advantage in certain scenarios? I am saying it gives them a different way of thinking about problems. Most species design weapons first, then train soldiers to use those weapons. Humans train soldiers to think like weapons, then give them tools that make them more effective. The bow does not make the archer dangerous. The archer's skill, judgment, and adaptability make them dangerous. The bow just extends what they can already do. A Valorian instructor spoke up. But this seems primitive. We have evolved beyond such crude approaches to warfare. Holland smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. Have you? In the siege of Velian 6, what happened when the Gentar forces used electromagnetic pulse weapons? The room became very quiet. Jake had studied that battle in his history courses. It was a famous disaster. The defenders had been completely helpless when their weapons stopped working. The defenders could not fight, Commander Vexthor said quietly. They surrendered within hours. Now imagine, Holland continued, if some of those defenders had training in weapons that did not need electronics, bows, crossbows, spears, even swords. Primitive? Yes, but functional when everything else fails. Sometimes the most advanced solution is to have a backup that is not advanced at all. He turned back to Jake. Cadet Morrison, how long would it take you to teach someone else to make that bow? Jake considered the question. Basic construction? Maybe 2 hours for someone with no experience. Learning to shoot accurately would take longer. But anyone could learn the fundamentals in a day or two. 2 hours to create a weapons production capability from materials that exist almost anywhere, Holland said to the room. No factories needed. No supply chain needed. No dependency on technology that can fail or be disrupted. I am not suggesting we abandon plasma rifles and energy weapons. I am suggesting that we have become too dependent on them. We have forgotten that sometimes simple solutions are better. A Quellan instructor asked, "Are you proposing we add primitive weapons training to the curriculum?" Holland shrugged. "I am proposing we think about it, not as a replacement for modern weapons training, but as a supplement, a backup, a way to teach cadets that they are never truly without resources, that their most important weapon is not what they carry in their hands. It is what they carry in their heads." Commander Vexthor was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "An interesting perspective. This warrants further discussion among the faculty." He turned to the class. "This has been an unusual lesson, but perhaps our most valuable one this semester. You have all seen that effectiveness in warfare is not just about having the most advanced technology. It is about adaptability, creativity, and the will to survive using whatever means are available." He looked at Jake. "Cadet Morrison, you have earned full marks for this assignment. I am also adding a commendation to your record for innovative thinking. Your bow will be preserved in the Academy Museum as an educational exhibit." Jake was surprised. "Sir? The museum has examples of primitive weapons from many species. We should include a human bow, especially one that demonstrates the improvisational nature of human warfare. You will receive credit as the maker." As the other cadets began filing out, many of them looked at Jake with new respect. A few even nodded to him as they passed. The Gentar cadet who had laughed earlier stopped at his desk. "That was impressive, human," she said. "I underestimated you. I will not make that mistake again." Jake nodded back. "Thank you." Captain Holland waited until most of the room had cleared, then approached Jake. "Well done, Morrison. You made humanity proud today." "Thank you, sir. I just tried to complete the assignment." Holland smiled. "You did more than that. You challenged assumptions. You made people think differently. That is more valuable than any test score." Jake gathered his makeshift bow and arrows carefully. His hands were still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. He had done it. He had turned what could have been a humiliating failure into something that people would remember. As he wrapped the arrows in what remained of his torn uniform jacket, Captain Holland sat on the edge of a desk nearby. "You know what you did today, right?" Holland asked quietly. Jake looked up. "I completed an assignment, sir." "You did more than that. You reminded everyone in this room that sophistication and superiority are not the same thing. These species have had advanced technology for thousands of years. They have forgotten what it means to struggle. They have forgotten what it means to have nothing and build something from it." Jake thought about that. "Do you think they understood, sir?" "Some did. Others will need time to process it. But seeds were planted today. Some of these cadets will go on to command ships. Some will lead armies. Some will advise governments. When they face a problem that cannot be solved with standard procedures and advanced technology, they will remember the human who built a weapon from furniture. They will remember that creative thinking can be more valuable than any tool." Jake carefully set the bow on the desk. "It feels strange, sir. On Earth, we are working so hard to catch up with the other species technologically. We want to prove we belong in the Galactic Council, but maybe our value is not in matching their technology. Maybe it is in bringing something different. Holland finished the thought. Every species has strengths. The Krellians are brilliant strategists. The Gentar are unstoppable warriors. The Valorians can coordinate without speaking. The Quellans are master engineers. And humans? We are the ones who refuse to accept that the tools we have are not enough. We make new tools, we adapt, we overcome. A thought occurred to Jake. Sir, did Commander Vexthor plan this? Did he set me up without a weapon, knowing I would have to improvise? Holland's expression gave nothing away. Commander Vexthor believes in teaching through experience rather than lectures. I cannot speak to his intentions, but I can say that he has seen humans before. He knows what we are capable of when pushed into a corner. As Holland stood to leave, Jake stopped him with a question. Sir, what happens now? Will this change anything? For you? Yes, word spreads fast in this academy. Your next classes will be more interesting because your instructors will be watching you. For the academy? Maybe. The faculty will discuss whether this demonstration has broader implications for training. For humanity? That remains to be seen. But you took a step today. You showed that humans have value beyond just being the newest members of the galactic community. After Holland left, several of Jake's classmates approached him. Crixnall, the Krellian who had questioned the efficiency of the bow, was first. Morrison, she said through her translator, I must apologize. When you said you had nothing, I assumed you were unprepared. I did not understand you were stating a fact that would become an advantage. No apology needed, Jake said. A month ago, I would have thought the same thing. But my basic training instructor told me something before I left Earth. He said a human is never unarmed. We just might not have picked up our weapon yet. A Quellan cadet, her skin flickering with colors that indicated curiosity, asked, Could you teach us to make these bows? Some of us want to learn. Jake looked at the small group gathered around him. These were cadets from species that had conquered their worlds with natural advantages. Species that had built civilizations spanning star systems. Species that had technology humans were still trying to understand. And they wanted to learn about bent sticks and sharp rocks, sure, he said, smiling. How about this weekend at the auxiliary training grounds? Bring materials you think might work. We will figure it out together. As the group left, discussing what materials they might find, Jake packed up his bow and arrows one final time. The bow would go to the museum. The arrows would probably be displayed with it. But the lesson would outlast the artifacts. He thought about humanity's place in the galaxy. Humans were newcomers. They were primitives by galactic standards. They had only just invented faster-than-light travel, while other species had been crossing space for thousands of years. But humans brought something valuable. They brought the perspective of a species that had earned every advantage. A species that had to create solutions rather than rely on natural superiority. As Jake walked down the corridor toward his quarters, he passed Commander Vexthor's office. Through the open door, he saw the commander talking with Captain Holland. Vexthor noticed Jake and gave him a small nod. Jake returned it and continued walking. Behind him, he heard Vexthor say, You were right about him. He will be trouble. The good kind of trouble, Holland replied. The kind that makes people think. The kind this academy needs more of. Jake smiled to himself. He had come to the academy hoping to prove humans deserved their place among the stars. He was starting to understand that humans did not need to prove anything. They just needed to be themselves. Adaptable, creative, and too stubborn to accept that any problem was impossible to solve. In his quarters, Jake set the bow on his desk. He would miss it after it went to the museum. He pulled up his communication console and composed a message to his family back on Earth. He told them about his day, keeping it simple. He had built a bow from classroom furniture and impressed his instructors. He left out most of the philosophical discussions. His little sister Amy would love this story. She was only 10, but already fascinated by everything he sent from space. He made a note to send her detailed instructions on bow making. Not for tactical reasons, just because she had asked him before he left to teach her something cool from the academy. A message notification appeared on his screen. It was from Commander Vexthor. Jake opened it with curiosity. Cadet Morrison, report to Advanced Tactical Studies next semester. Your elective request has been approved. We will be covering unconventional warfare and resource-limited combat scenarios. Your input will be valuable. Commander Vexthor. Jake read it twice, then smiled. His demonstration had opened doors he had not expected. He sent back a quick acknowledgement and leaned back in his chair. Over the next few days, word of what happened in the weapons course spread through the academy. Jake found himself stopped in corridors by cadets asking questions. Some wanted to know more about human history. Others wanted to discuss tactical applications of primitive weapons. A few just wanted to see the human who had built a weapon from furniture. The weekend arrived, and Jake met his study group at the auxiliary training grounds. 15 cadets had shown up, representing 8 different species. They brought materials they thought might work for bow making. Metal rods, flexible plastics, composite materials, even some actual wood that a Valorian had requisitioned from the botanical gardens. Jake taught them the basics: how to test materials for flexibility, how to create the right amount of tension, how to make arrows that would fly straight. Some of the cadets struggled. Their body types were not designed for drawing a bow, but they adapted, finding ways to make it work. By the end of the day, 7 functional bows had been created. They were crude and would not win any competitions. But they worked. More importantly, the cadets understood the principle now. They understood that a weapon was not just what you bought from an armory. A weapon was anything you could make work. As Jake cleaned up the training ground, Crixnell approached him. "Morrison, I have been thinking about what you and Captain Holland said, about humans having no natural weapons, about needing to create tools to survive. It must have been frightening for your ancestors." Jake thought about that. Maybe. But I think it also made them stronger in a different way. When you have natural weapons, you rely on them. When you have nothing, you learn to think. You learn to adapt. You learn that giving up is not an option. "That is a powerful mindset," Crixnell said thoughtfully. "My people have always relied on our natural advantages. I wonder if that has made us weaker in some ways." "Not weaker," Jake said. "Just different. Every species has strengths. The key is understanding what yours are and using them well." As the evening grew late, Jake returned to his quarters. He sat at his desk and looked at the empty space where the bow had been. Tomorrow it would be in the museum. Students would see it for years to come. They would read about the human cadet who built it in less than an hour. Some would understand the lesson. Others would just see a curiosity, but that was fine. Jake had not built the bow to make a statement. He had built it to complete an assignment. Everything else was just a bonus. His datapad chimed with a new message. It was from Amy. She had received his instructions about bow making and had already built her first bow from branches in their backyard. She included a picture. It was crude but functional. Jake smiled. The human ability to create and adapt was already showing in the next generation. He sent back a message praising her work and suggesting improvements. Then he turned to his homework for the next day. He had a test on energy shield mechanics. No amount of improvisation would help him there. He would have to study the hard way, but as Jake reviewed his notes, he felt different than he had a week ago. He felt like he belonged, not because he had proven humans were as advanced as other species,